So for historical context, who is Hosea as he fits into the biblical timeline, the prophet, whether this actually happened? And I think it happened. He's in the northern kingdom. And if you look at verse 1 of chapter 1, it says, the word of the Lord that came unto Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Those four names should have been a little bit familiar to you if you remember Isaiah. Those are the same four kings that Isaiah served under. So Hosea is a contemporary with Isaiah. The only difference is he's up north. Look at the second half of verse 1. And in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. So you've got one king up north in the northern kingdom, four kings down south during the same time period. Isaiah's down here, Hosea's up north with these tribes that are just about to be carried away captive or destroyed by the Assyrians at the end of his preaching and prophesying. So that kind of orients you on who he is, where he's living.
So Jeroboam II is one of the longest lived kings in the northern kingdom of Israel. And there's actually tremendous economic prosperity and even peace during his time. The international scene has changed. Syria in the north is a little weakened. Assyria is not threatening as much. And Hosea is dealing in these times where the people are seeing all this peace and prosperity, and you have these differences where people are using their resources to oppress those in society, among other things. And it seems significant that Hosea seems to be alive for a number of decades as the prosperity, we've seen the cycle, gets way high, the people become decadent, the prophets call them to repentance, and eventually God, as we hear here, I have invited you into the covenant. If you walk away, you will leave the land, but my arms of mercy will always be available for you. So Hosea, in some ways, reminds me a bit of Mormon, who sees this cycle of where his people are deeply prosperous and then turn away from God, even though his arms of mercy are wide open, and they end up suffering the consequences of persistently, consistently, and over a long period of time, rejecting God.
So we're excited to jump in and tell this story as it comes off of the page to us. Let's start in verse 2. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea, and the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredoms departing from the Lord. That's an interesting command, very unusual for God to command his prophet, go and marry a daughter of whoredoms. Go marry somebody who has completely been unfaithful in any kind of moral way. So in verse 3, we're introduced to his wife, Gomer. She's the daughter of Diblaim. So if you look at these names for a moment, Gomer means complete. That's interesting. And she is the daughter of Diblaim. You'll notice the di means two cakes. 2 cakes of figs is kind of the implication here. Almost as if it's to show this opulent pleasure. She is the offspring of prosperity that we've been talking about. It's encapsulated in the name. She is what is the offspring of all of this double pleasure, this fullness of everything I could want. And now Hosea marries Gomer.
What's interesting is if somebody's complete, do they need anything? Do they need salvation? If you have all your needs taken care of, do you really need God anymore? The answer is yes. But sometimes when we think we're complete, when we have all of our physical needs taken care of, we may get lulled into carnal security and say, I'm complete, my salvation is secure, physical or whatever, and therefore I don't need this anymore. And it's interesting, God sends to somebody who believes they're complete, true completion, true salvation. So some interesting symbols and metaphors going on here in the story.
Yeah, so by the way, some of you are looking at this thinking, who would name their daughter Gomer? That's a really strange name to give to a girl. Well, her father is to blame for that name. A little bit of dumb humor there. So their first child is born, and they name him Jezreel. You'll notice the name of God, El, in here. It means God sows, to sow. Now, the name Jezreel comes up in other places in the Bible. You might be familiar with the Jezreel Valley up in Galilee.
Yeah, this beautiful, really highly productive farmland still to this day. And it was called the Jezreel Valley because for people, it's like they see God's hand in their lives with all this productive fruit, vegetation, and plants. It was really the breadbasket of Israel as it is still today.
As it is today. So it's his name implies a planter going out sowing the fields with these seeds that they pull out of a bag and then scatter them and bring forth abundantly. So the name Jezreel is directly a foreshadowing for what is about to happen at the end of Hosea's ministry. Assyria is going to come in and sow the children of Israel into all other parts of the empire, and from there out into other parts of the world as they continue to scatter.
But here we are in the latter days, and God's asking us to harvest all those seeds that were planted so long ago. That's part of the purpose of missionary work in the restoration, is let's go gather in all those who've been scattered. And in my study today, I learned something that I really wish I'd known a long time ago. The name Jezreel is also a sound play on the name Israel. So we use the letter J in English, but in the Hebrew, it'd be Yezreel, which sounds like Yisrael, which is how you say Israel. So God, revealing through Hosea, is doing a wordplay that God sows or scatters, not just Jezreel, but it's Jezreel, Yisrael. So when people heard this, they're like, wow, God is planting us, but am I allowing him to plant me where I should belong, or am I going to be planted elsewhere because I decided to walk away from him?
Which that deciding to walk away from him comes up in child number 2 and 3. So you'll notice right after it gave us the name of Jezreel in verse 4, it says, "For yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel." So you get this first major prophecy of Hosea saying, just a little while more, and the kingdom of Israel, of the house of Israel, is going to cease. We're going to be scattered. Jezreel is going to take place. It's going to be sown throughout the world. Which now brings us down into verse 6. She conceived again and bare a daughter. And God said unto him, Call her name Lo Ruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. So child number 2, this sister, Lo Ruhamah, means no or not, because the lo is the opposite in the Hebrew, no mercy.
Yeah, it's an interesting word. Ruhamah means like beloved, merciful. If you actually know anything about the Islamic religion, they will call God Al-Rahim, which means the merciful, abundant one. And so God is essentially saying, the mercy that I have made available is actually not available if you choose to walk away. To be in the covenantal relationship, you have to be faithful. If you are unfaithful and you're outside the covenant, I can't give you the mercy. And so this daughter's name is to symbolize for the 10 northern tribes of Israel, because of your wickedness, you won't get mercy. You can't. The laws of justice mean you cannot have the mercy until you choose to accept God as your Savior.
So put this in its historical setting up north with these 10 tribes, where they're being told that this is going to happen to you, but they might be scratching their heads saying, but what about our cousins in our opposing country down south in the kingdom of Judah? Look at verse 7. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah. So the house of Judah is going to get this Ruhamah. You're not going to get it up here in the north. You've been warned and warned and warned. They've at least repented enough. They've had a few righteous kings along the way to help them. So they're going to get mercy from the Lord. and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. And we see that fulfilled with King Hezekiah and the Lord destroying Sennacherib and that Assyrian army through his own miraculous means. Now we get to verse 8. When she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, call his name Lo-ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. What Taylor's describing here, they've taken themselves outside of the arms of mercy, and Lo-ammi is, you are not my people. You've heard this phrase over and over again this year as we've studied the Old Testament. The all covenants, whether it be Abrahamic or Mosaic or baptismal or endowment, all covenants we make are at the core a strengthening of this statement, I will be your God and you will be my people. And now with this third child, Lo-ammi, Hosea is saying to the people, you're not his people, and he's not your God, not because he broke the covenant yet again, but because you refuse to abide in the covenant. You refuse to accept him as your God and to treat him and trust him like a God, and so he can't treat you like his people. So the names are the lesson. That is the overview of the history of the house of Israel in that northern kingdom, is this first chapter of Hosea, where you're getting this marriage, this most unusual marriage, and these three children. Thank heaven that chapter 1 doesn't end with verse 9, with this reality of God's justice needing to be sent down on the people. Thank heaven that you get verse 10, yet. You notice that first word, yet? It's in spite of this, you're not my people and I'm not your God anymore, by your choice, by your choosing, yet gives you this counter hope in the future. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, that it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. I love how our prophets, seers, and revelators today focus us on our identity more than on just what we do and say. President Nelson has given us 3 things to really define the core identity as children of God, children of the covenant, and disciples of Christ. I love that. It gives me hope for when my behaviors and my outward actions fall short, to be able to go back to those deepest core identities of who I am, who I was, and who I'm striving to become. And it gives me hope for the present when I'm struggling in any aspect of life.
God is acting in covenant here. We're going to take you back to Genesis chapter 12, where God said to Abraham, here's what I'm going to do for you and for all your posterity. So verse 10 is God expressing his ongoing and eternal covenantal obligation to make salvation available to everybody through the family of Abraham. That is God's covenantal duty. Now, he can't force anybody to stay in the covenant, which is what we've been seeing in the preceding verses, that the people use their agency to go follow after other gods. And eventually God says, fine, you want to be in league with other gods, go live in their lands. But I love that the scriptures, even though they can be complex, really can be boiled down to the simplicity of covenants. That God has made an eternal covenant through Abraham to all of us, that we all are freely offered salvation. And the culmination of that is through Jesus Christ. And all these prophets have been trying to teach that. And in return, he just seeks our love and loyalty. And if you look at Hosea, you can look at the consequences of what happens when people choose to be loyal, what happens when people choose to be unfaithful, And how does God respond? In the long run, what does he do? And ultimately, in everlasting acts of kindness and mercy and love, he continues to invite everybody in. So no matter where you're at in your life, no matter what you have done, there's nothing you have done that will keep you out of God's presence if now you say, I'm going to turn to God my Father and reconnect myself into that identity that is eternal, that I am his child. So let the past go, give it over to Jesus, join with God, and let his salvation play out in your life. That is the message we have right here in Hosea.
I love that. It's that idea of regardless of where you are, go back to those three elements that President Nelson has given us. Child of God, child of the covenant, disciple of Christ. We can all do a little better with that today than we maybe did yesterday. And that's empowering. Now, you'll notice up to this point in chapter 1, before we got to verse 10, it was all about this scattering and these consequences. Well, now verse 10 was this promise of coming back. And then look at verse 11, which we're going to read verse 11 here together. And in a 21st century context, it's a nice verse. It gives us hope for this gathering effort on both sides of the veil. Sometimes, I think, Taylor, we put a lot of emphasis on our missionary work in the church as part of the gathering. And I think what our prophets, seers, and revelators today are helping us to see is that you are doing gathering work when you do temple and family history work just as much as when you do ministering, just as much as when you do missionary work. These are not separate elements of the gospel. Elder David A. Bednar has talked about this multiple times, this idea of they are all part of the same gospel of Jesus Christ, and this gathering effort involves all of these things that we're doing. Look at verse 11 now, in that context.
That's a helpful reminder. I'll just say that's helpful because sometimes we might emphasize one part of the gospel gathering over the others, and therefore forget that God is trying to gather all his children on any side of the veil at any time.
So if you go to verse 11, it says, "Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head, one leader." In Hosea's context, from the northern tribes, the northern kingdom, in this time period, that's a big promise that we are going to be reunited as a family. I don't know what your family situation is, but we live in a world where there are struggles in many families with division, divisiveness, differences of opinions that grow to the level where it can tear families apart. And it can feel almost as if there's no hope for that family to ever come back together and be united under one head ever again. And I'm sure most of the people in the kingdom of Israel felt that way about the people down in the kingdom of Judah and vice versa. And so to get this promise of the latter-day restoration of the entire tribes of Israel coming back together under one head, and that head being the Lord Jesus Christ, that's a beautiful promise for all of us today, which I hope motivates us in our missionary, temple and family history, ministering efforts, our gathering efforts, whatever they may look like, that it becomes more of our core identity being manifested in how we act, how we treat people, how we talk to people, how we love, share, and invite in our missionary efforts, how we really truly minister, and how we do everything we can to help those on the other side of the veil to enter into these covenants with the Lord. It's a powerful opener to this story that we've now got the entire message of the scattering and the gathering of Israel in 11 short verses on one page of an often overlooked book in the Old Testament that, like I said, it's one of our favorites of the entire canon for a good reason.